All right, what's happening, everyone? Welcome back to Generation, Bridging the Gap with Rex
and Eva.
So glad you guys are along for the ride. And as we mentioned in the previous episode, we are going to I am going to take the majority of today's episode and just talk about my story a little bit. We both mentioned that we're adopted. Eva's adopted. Yes. I'm adopted. And so that gave us a immediate bond right out of the gate. And I can't wait for you to get a chance to share your story in episode 3. And just looking forward to that big time. But let's go ahead and start with my story. And I have really struggled, to be honest about it. I am in the process of writing a book. You know this, that I wrote over 200 pages over 20 years ago. And I just, you didn't know that?
I didn't realize it was that long. I thought it was like 5 or 10 years ago.
No, it was, if I thought about it long enough, I could come up with the date, but it was probably early, let's just say 2000, around 2000. And
6 years before I was born.
Yeah, 6 years before you were born. But I was had the privilege to teach Army ROTC, and our cadets were at summer camp. And the cadre always went with them for camp, and we were at Fort Lewis, Washington. And so you were there all summer, and I thought, man, what a great time to start a book. And so after the cadets were kind of in for the night, I would just sit in my office at a laptop and started writing my life story, 200 pages, and I just kind of shoved it on a thumb drive and put it in the drawer. And I thought, who would want to read that? I'm not John Maxwell. I'm not Max Lucado. Who cares?
Okay, I'm going to date myself severely. You were, laptops were a thing in 2000?
Yeah, there were laptops in 2000. Yeah,
that blows my mind a little
now,
bit.
Obviously not as efficient as what you have, but yeah,
yours did good to run Word.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly what we had was Word.
Though.
Yeah, it's all you need. And so anyway, I just stuck it away, and really part of it is I didn't know how to end the story. And so fast forward 20 years later, here's the cool thing. I have 20 additional years of perspective, of context, and I have still really molded over what's the best way to tell the story that you have, that God is giving you and that He intends for you to share with other people. And one of the things I came up with, actually a friend of mine invited me on a podcast about 4 months ago, and it was the first time I'd ever been on a podcast. And on the way to the recording, I thought, man, you got to figure out a way to tell this story. It's a great story, but you got to hold people's interest. And so I really came up with 4 segments or 4 pieces to my story. And it's actually the way that I am in the process right now of rewriting the book. You know that I've started that process, really excited about it. But it's going to take a lot of work to get it done. But we want to get it to the finish line this year. But it's going to have 4 parts. So if that's all right, you cool with that?
I am cool with that.
All right, awesome.
I think it's real cool. Some kids may be like, why is my dad doing this? And I'm like, no, this is really cool. But again, you've taught me your entire life about legacy, or my entire life about legacy. So this is cool.
Yeah.
To hear about this.
Yeah.
I don't hear all of it. I'm sure I have, but I'm going to hear things I haven't heard. So
you will. And that goes back to what you were talking about previous episode, stories. I actually said that you used to always say, Dad, Mom, tell me a story.
Never fantasy. I always wanted a real life story.
Yep. And we've lost that art in culture. If you think about it, back even in the 1800s, 1700s, again, no radio, no television. So people really were master storytellers. Think about it. What did people do after dinner when there was no television, no internet, no nothing? They either went to the theater or, more likely, they sat around a campfire. They sat around a dinner table with candlelight, and they told stories.
I wrote my thesis on the importance of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to hear about my thesis next episode because I'm really proud of it. So You're going to hear me talk about that. I'm just sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I can't wait to hear about it. Well, let's get into my story and the four pieces. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you what the four pieces are so you can follow along. But number one, there was trauma and tragedy. Then there was healing and recovery. Then there was relapse. And then there was a resurrection. And sometimes, when I say that, I'm thinking about people that struggle with addiction. You could relate to it from that standpoint. Often there's a stress point that causes people to rely on a substance of some type. And so they get addicted and they go through trauma, they go through tragedy. And then they may go through healing and recovery through an interdiction. Somebody helps them, a friend. They come to a realization on their own. But then often as they're coming out of that recovery, unfortunately, sometimes there's a relapse where they just weren't quite ready to take all the steps to success. And then ultimately, what I think we would all like to see happen in our life is that there is a resurrection.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are the four pieces of the story. So here we go. Trauma and tragedy. What happened is I was born to a single mother, and she did the very best she could to make ends meet. Never met my biological father, and I hated him with a passion because he abandoned her. He lied to her. He mistreated her. He left her. And he left her with a child in a metropolitan city. Again, I've mentioned that, Memphis. And I have very few memories of that, but I just remember she did the very best she could. And it was me and Mom. We moved around from spot to spot. And I didn't realize this until a couple of years ago. I read a book called Evicted, and it's a study on the urban housing problem and the fact that it's just this vicious cycle of people trying to get out of their socioeconomic problems and challenges, and they get evicted and they go from place to place. Well, all of a sudden, as I was reading that book, I realized, I'm like, oh, why did Mom and I move so many different places? I'm like, bro, y'all got evicted. She couldn't make ends meet. And so I used to hear this all the time, Eva, you will find yourself in a book. And so, yeah, you'll find yourself in a book. So as I'm reading that particular book, I thought,
You took it quite literally.
I did take it literally, but I'm like, it was lights on because I remember we lived in a trailer park twice, 2 different trailers. We lived in 2 to 3 different apartments that I remember. And so I just thought, why do we move around so much? And the book brought that to light. Hey, your mom had a hard time making ends meet. And she was doing good just to put food on the table. And so that's my story. Didn't know my biological dad. He left her. Again, I hated him just for what my perception was of what he did to her. But here's the truth. You know what? He probably never had a role model in his own life. You just mentioned the term legacy. He probably never even heard the term legacy and never even got taught the things that a husband, that a man should be taught. And so I really don't blame him anymore. And that I'll maybe talk about that on another episode, how I got healed from that particular situation, especially the anger, the bitterness, the hatred that I had toward him. But that's how it started off, and it was rough. And you already know that the story gets rougher in this tragedy part. We couldn't make ends meet. Mom couldn't make ends meet. So at 5 years old, we moved in with my grandparents. I called them Granny and Pap. And they lived on, I believe it was I'd have to look it up. I've got it in my notes somewhere, but Locklear Drive over by Memphis International Airport. I could probably find my way over there if I went back. But anyway, we moved in with them, and here's where it really got tough over the next 2 years. When we moved in, and again, I was 5, my mom would have been 31 at that point. The first year we were in the home, Granny got killed in a head-on car wreck. And then a year passed, and then Pap dropped dead of a heart attack in the house. And then another year passed. So we've been there 2 years now. Granny's gone, Pap's gone. And then at the end of the second year, I am now 7 years old, and my mother died, Joanne. She passed away of colon cancer. And so I remember how devastating that was as a 7-year-old boy. I mean, I was just shell shocked. I'm like, what else? What else can happen? And, at this point, I always laugh when I'm telling this story in person. Every woman that is listening to this story, they don't see a 64-year-old guy. They see a 7-year-old boy telling this story. So everybody wants to be my mom. So for those ladies that happen to be listening in today, I had a great mom. Actually, I wound up having two. But I get the maternal instinct, and it always blesses my heart. You would think it would be the men that are really moved by this story, and some are, but it's the ladies that are moved by
The men
this.
are moved by the army part.
The army part, yeah, the parachute. So all that to say, that's a tragic beginning, but that's as bad as it gets, realistically. But I do remember, I thought, what in the world can happen next? And it made me withdraw. I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't rebel against authority. I didn't do any of that, but it just kind of withdrew. And the general thought was, I'm like, hey, don't touch me. Don't tell me you love me. You're not going to be around. Something bad is going to happen. So I just had this, that's my perspective. Yeah. Hey, I'm 7 years old, right? And everybody that lives in my house dies. And so, it was just a withdrawal period of where I withdrew again inward. And I was just like, hey, don't touch me. Don't tell me you love me. Just stay away from me and give me time to figure this out. So again, hey, everybody relax. Everybody take a deep breath. All of our listeners, and smile, including you, Eva. That's as bad as it gets. But here's where the story turned. This is part 2, the healing and recovery. Oh my goodness. You've heard me say this before. I might as well have been raised by Moses and Miriam. Ma and Pa, they entered the picture. And Ma was not much older than my mother. And as a matter of fact, they were family, but they adopted me. And Ma was my grandmother's baby sister. Okay, my great aunt. And so there was only, I think, about an 8-year, I've looked it up and I can't remember. I think there was only an 8-year age difference between Ma, who became your grandma, and my mother. She just wasn't that much older than my mother. And so they adopted me, her and her husband. They didn't have children. And so they took me across the bridge, the Mississippi River, the bridge into northeast Arkansas, into a farming community. And what a wonderful place to grow up. Wynne, Arkansas. Shout out. We used to go, it's known as the city with a smile. If you go to the bridge, there's a railroad track that runs over Falls Boulevard, and they have it painted on the side of the railroad track. It says, "Welcome to Wynne, the city with a smile." And it did put a smile on my face. It was a great place to grow up. Population right around 8,000, and just tremendous people, tremendous memories, lessons learned. It was a great community. And that's where the story turned, and I began to heal. And here's something you can resonate with. I had 4 friends that we went through elementary school together, junior high, high school, and college. And I can't tell you what an impact that made, just being loved by those 4 friends that were always there. We were there, thick and thin, as they say, and did everything together. And we're still friends to this day. We're on a GroupMe text thread, and we put prayer requests out there. We let each other know what's going on in our life. And here it is, really 50 plus years later, and we meet once a year for dinner in Little Rock, Arkansas. And it's just a really, really cool, neat part of the story. So huge shout out. We used to call us the Wynne Five.
Yeah, I was like, what is y'all's clever name for that?
Yeah, our clever name was the Wynne Five, and it was me and Bobby Tucker, Jeff Gregory, John Hampton, and Wesley George. And then we were also fortunate to have a group of friends that was a year ahead of us and a year behind us. And so that win 5, as far as I'm concerned, became the win 24, because we went to college and we had a blast together, and it was really fun. And again, I stay in touch with not just the 4 that were there for all of those years, but the ones that were, again, a year ahead and a year behind. Is really, really cool. So any questions that you can think of on that part?
I mean, I can't think of any questions, but I do. My favorite story about this time period in his life is every day Paul would get off work and take his sports jacket off and his tie off, and they would go play catch in the backyard. And I think that was just super special, because for years he tried to get me to play catch with him. I am not a big outdoors fan. I played volleyball for a couple of years, and I'm learning golf, but catch was not my thing. And so, but it was like the moments that made it happy. And so I think that's like one of my favorite stories about that time.
That is a cool story. I'm glad you brought that up, because in all honesty, I just forgotten about that as I'm telling the story, but Paul was really good at that. And to be honest about it, Eva, there are times that I have been very hard on myself, because I don't feel like I've spent the time with you that Paul did with me. But I've had to put it in context. Paul didn't have a cell phone. Paul didn't have the internet to contend with. Back then, when people left their office at 5 o'clock, you were done for the day. There was no email. There was no constant connection. So when you came home, the advantage was you were truly with your family. You sat down for dinner. You talked. You might have watched TV together. Yeah. Paul played Battleship with me. That was another favorite.
That Battleship.
You do have that Battleship.
Same exact one.
Same exact one. And I can't tell you how many times we sat in the den and played Battleship. And so the point there is just intentional time. And again, I used to beat myself up probably 4 or 5 years ago when I thought, man, I'm just not spending the time with Eva that Dad did with me. But we found other ways.
Yeah, we did.
We traveled a lot.
We did.
Paul never did that. That's one thing I learned from him. I thought I want to do better. Back then, people just didn't take vacations. They worked. That's what they did. So I don't have any memories of Mom and Paul and me on family vacation. And I thought, you know what? That's something that I want to be different with us. So we've made an intentional effort to travel and to take you places. Yep. And that's one of the advantages of having older parents that are a little bit further along in their financial journey with stability, et cetera. So anyway, we've had a good time, have we not?
Oh, we've had a blast. And look, we're making quality time with each other doing this podcast.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
You know, we just adapt.
And whether you remember or not, you actually were pretty good at catching the baseball.
My
you weren't
hand-eye
bad.
coordination's gone severely down since then. I can't walk upstairs.
So you can't. Well, okay.
Yeah, you should have seen me the other day carrying a bowl of something upstairs. I about flat against the ground. I don't have the same coordination I did, 10 years ago.
Okay. Well, but you can get that back, right?
Yeah, that is something you can get back.
Right. So we need to work on that. Coordination, staying in shape, physical fitness, all of that's critical. And so that's kind of phase 2 of the story. I was able to heal. I was able to recover. Ma and Paul gave me things that my birth mother could only dream about. And again, I always want to honor her. She did the very best she could. She got dealt a rough set of cards, so to speak. Had a husband that abandoned her, again, mistreated her. And again, not to condemn him. He just didn't know any better. And so she just had a hard time. But Ma and Paul were able to provide me things that she simply couldn't. They gave me stability. They gave me safety, security. They wound up giving me my name. They adopted me, gave me their last name, and I carry it very proudly. It is a legacy in itself. And so anyway, just a great, great story of God's redemption, of God's love, His grace, His mercy. And, how can I explain what happened to me? Because I know that for every great news story like this, there's one that someone may be listening and say, well, I didn't have that advantage. And my heart really goes out for anyone that says that, hey, I didn't get out of the situation I was in. I don't have good memories of my parents, but hey, God can redeem every situation that we ever find ourselves in. And I just hope that's an example to people. That in my moment of great need, God showed up on my behalf, and it's been an incredible ride. Now, part 3 is what I would call the relapse. Sometimes when you have some initial success, whatever the healing process is, maybe it's too much for you. Maybe there's a trigger, another stress point or tension point that comes along, and people will sometimes have a relapse.
Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us wherever you listen to your podcast so you never miss an episode. And make sure to follow us on Instagram at G2G_podcast and on Facebook at Generation to Generation.